Hi, welcome back to this channel. I am the Spellsinger, and this is my ongoing review of the Greenspine Fighting Fantasy Gamebook series. And this review is going to give you a quick look at this book and title number. And I'll read the blurb, go through the plot for this book, and then look at some of the game mechanics and the adventure sheet. And then I'll look at some of my likes and dislikes, any fun facts and errors that are worth mentioning. And then I'll finish on a summary and score, and then maybe give a quick shout out to someone who's also into these books. Before I do the review though, I just wanted to send a quick thank you to some of the subscribers that have joined on lately. So just picked 5 at random. So a big thank you to Richard Phillips, Via Retning, Michael Riley, Earthbound Misfit 131, and Sandro John Amendola. I think I pronounced that right. Thank you. Welcome. So yeah, this book, this is Seas of Blood. So this is title number 16, and it's published in 1985. And the author is Andrew Chapman. So he is back with his third and final entry in this series of books. This cover artist here, this was done by the legendary Rodney Matthews, but the internal artwork is by Bob Harvey. So he's back after his short stint away helping Thompson and Smith with the Way of the Tiger series. So yeah, this one we leave, we're still in Titan, but we leave the inland and we head out onto the high sea for some swashbuckling adventure. Now the blurb, so you get an idea of what's going on in this one. I'll just give you a quick idea. It says here, the city of Tak is the greatest den of thieves, pirates and cutthroats that the civilized world has ever seen. In this city of scum, there are 2 pirates infamous for their ruthless greed, their daring raids, and their countless skirmishes with death. One of these villains is Abdul the Butcher. The other is you. The only one can be the king of the pirates. A wager is laid, a race is on, but which of you will win? So, yeah, so it's basically a race against time to be king of the pirates. Now, the plot for this one is it's quite straightforward. You are the pirate captain who is basically engaged in this wager. So that's with your rival, Abdul the Butcher. And you decide basically who is to be king of the pirates, and the only way you can do that is to travel south and reach this isle of Nippur, and with the most booty, and the one with the most booty wins. So you both have a limited amount of time which to sail around the inland seas and basically go plundering, murdering, and robbing to gather as much gold and slaves as possible. And whoever has the most, like I say, when you reach Nippur, is declared the winner. A simple plot, which works well and is a nice change from sort of the usual assassinating some megalomaniac who is threatening the world or going through a dungeon crawl to find the treasure and fame. So, nice change. Seas of Blood is, like I say, Andrew Chapman's third and final contribution to this series of game books. Which is a shame, actually. This is really well written. It's a good old swashbuckling adventure full of variety and full of twists, lots of fun twists. The plot is sort of wholly amoral. It's concerned only with acquisition of treasure by any means, fair or foul. So in this book, between you and this most powerful rival pirate, Abdul the Butcher, you each take a ship across the sea and set off for the Isle of Nippur. Whoever makes it to the destination within 50 days on your ship's log is declared the winner, and most of the gold, basically as much gold as you possibly can get by plundering or selling slaves, is declared the winner. So that's it really, that's the plot. It's nice and straightforward. Game mechanics and adventure sheet for this book. The book includes new rules for combat between vessels. So you've got a bit like with Freeway Fighter where you had vehicle combat, now you have vessel combat. So you get 2 new attributes. you get crew strike, which is like your skill, and that is a 1d6 plus 6. And you also get crew strength, which is like your stamina, and that is a 2d6 plus 6. Now, Seas of Blood is also the first fighting fantasy game book to feature a measure of time that helps determine success or failure. And that's in the form of your ship's log, and is one of the things that will cause most hardship in this adventure, because it's a really tight time frame. So basically there's no provisions or potions or anything like that to restore your stamina, but every day added to your log you can increase or restore your stamina by 1 point. So the more time you're out there sailing, the more time you recover, which kind of makes sense. There's no instruction in this book that your skill or crew strike scores cannot exceed their initial values, but I'm assuming that they can't. There are mechanics in the guise of special items to be found that allow you to sort of travel faster while sailing from port to port. So, for example, there's a place where you can get a bag of wind, which obviously fills your sails and allows you to travel that much quicker. In detail, the two new stats, crew strike and crew strength, they're for skirmishes with other ships mostly, or groups of people, and often these are sort of quite tough inter-crew battles. So obviously on sea it's ship to ship, but on land, if you go inland at all, you take your crew with you or a handful of crew, and if you come across any groups of villainous people or other pirates, then that's also a kind of crew strike battle that can take place. You also can't escape any unless you win an attack round, so that kind of makes sense as well, that you can't just flee, you have to win at least one round. And to add a sense of urgency, there's this log that I mentioned, which where you can keep track basically of how long you've been travelling at sea. But if you exceed this number of days that you've agreed with Abdul, then it's basically game over. Some extra rules have been added to deal with time being a healer. Like I say, this recovering stamina based on how many days you have on your ship's log. And you can also capture slaves to increase your crew strength. So obviously as you bring more slaves on, crew strength goes up. The adventure sheet I'll put up here is more or less standard, but you've got obviously your crew strike and crew strength boxes there. You've got your equipment list, and the only other one really worth mentioning is the booty, where you can obviously record any gold or slaves that you come across, and then they get traded in later on at this special port where you get gold basically for the number of slaves. But otherwise, it's not complete. It's not a completely new adventure sheet. It kind of picks from the old classic one, but it's nice to have a couple of new attributes in there as well. Artwork. So the cover was by Rodney Matthews. I'll put a picture of him up here. He's amazing. He's obviously a British artist, and he deals mostly in kind of fantasy, high fantasy, and some kind of steampunk almost sort of artwork. That's what he's best known for. And as far as I know, he really only did this one cover for the series, which is a shame because he's so well renowned. I'll run some of his other pictures through so you can get an idea of what kind of artwork he does, but it's highly visual, very detailed. I think he did a lot of work for the Lord of the Rings as well. So that kind of really comes across, that high fantasy look that he's so well known for. But yeah, a shame that he didn't do more, but very nice to have him on board for this one. But we've also got Bob Harvey, who does the interior work. So he provided art for Talisman of Death, and Sword of the Samurai for this series as well. Gives us a kind of sun-drenched, very bright feel to this story, with his work, similar to Treasure Island. You get that Treasure Island kind of feel. And some of Harvey's art looks more sort of historical with all the ships and vessels and the ports, and it kind of can maybe detach from the game slightly, but he makes up for it with his sea creatures and pirates as well. Harvey brings some wonderful illustrations, but sometimes there is a kind of strange choice of scene that's granted a full illustration. I think typically a picture depicts the most action-packed reference to the following page, but this is it's not always the case. It appears more random, but yeah, I've got a favourite picture, which is this one here. This sea monster here coming out of the water, and the waves and your ship getting trashed, and then there's this poor pirate in the mouth of one of the heads. I think that really kind of sums up this book, you know, the unknown while you're out at sea. Really like this one. Likes and dislikes for this book. Initially, it appears quite open world, which is quite interesting and varied, but multiple playing will show you just how linear it can be. You can learn from sort of replaying and gradually discover the true path. So there's a lot of playability involved in this book, a lot of lastability on offer, but the one true path rewards you the most booty and the most slaves within the shortest time period. So that would be the most linear path, and really the only path you can take. It's quite fun playing the villain sometimes. There's lots of side missions and side quests that you can get involved in. The Cyclops fight at the end is very clever and sort of consisted of a series of choices rather than just rolling dice. So you can go for a kick to the knee or an elbow to the face, or you can even punch him in his single eye, which is a bit nasty. But yeah, he is a Cyclops. But yeah, I thought that was quite nice. It felt different from the usual sort of fighting fantasy style combat, and reminded me of that Balthus Dire battle in Citadel of Chaos. The book is quite tough. Really tough. There's a lot of sort of instant deaths, and there's a lot of luck testing. Many of the fails of that are instant deaths as well. There's also a place where you get a 6 out of 7 chance of losing your ship, so obviously that's game over. You need 800 gold coins to win the game. To have that much at the end is quite tough, and even after mapping out the whole book, you'll be lucky to fetch a good price for all your slaves and reach Naiper within 50 days. So it's really tough. You know, you've got to have a good crew strike, a good crew strength. You've got to do it all in 50 days, which means having some kind of aid for your ship to travel faster. You've got to have 800 gold coins and get a good price for your slaves. So it's really tough. One of the toughest, I would say. Fun facts for this book. This was adapted into, I think it was by Adventure Soft, sort of computer game for the ZX Spectrum, Commodore 64, Amstrad, BBC Micro, I think, as well, and the Acorn Electron sort of home computers. So a bit like the previous review, it got its own game, which was quite nice. It was branded as a sort of fighting fantasy software and distributed by Adventure International UK. So these games were finding their way into the digital media, which of course is very common now, with a lot of the Scholastic books as well. So a bit ahead of its time in that respect. Seas of Blood was first published using the Adventure Game book banner, unlike the standard green sort of zigzag stripe across the top of the cover, and containing the words Adventure Game Book in white and the number of the book also in white. With Seas of Blood, the writing in the stripe was black, as was the number, and this would be repeated only one more time in Robot Commando. So yeah, a bit weird, but different. Although the inland sea, where Seas of Blood takes place, was based in Cool, in Titan, this was not the original game plan, not the original intention of Andrew Chapman. Chapman revealed on Rebuilding Titan Yahoo group that he had created a more sort of extensive geography and history for that world, which he used later in 2 other books, actually, and also in the unpublished Fighting Fantasy Death Lord. One of these other 2 books was Ashkar the Magnificent, which contains the same map as Seas of Blood. But yeah, a couple of fun facts here for you. Errors, there's only really one error that's worth mentioning in this book, but it was a bit of a game breaker back in those days before we had the internet and we could work out what the correct paragraph was. So yeah, it was one of these incorrect paragraphs. So some of the editions, I think some editions of the book incorrectly instructed you at reference 352 to go to 255 when it should have been 225. So yeah, back in the day, we would then have to have flipped through the whole book trying to work out what the correct reference was when the one they told us didn't make sense. So, right, summary and score for this book. This is great, but it's so tough, both in the combat encounters sense and in the instant death sense as well. This is not one of those, regardless of your initial strength, you should be fine kind of books. Combat-wise, you will need a high 11 or 12 crew strike to stand any real chance of surviving all the vessel battles. And any of that ship combat, also inland combat. There's some tough combats that return hardly any booty, adding to sort of the difficulty, of the fact that you need to choose wisely before engaging with other ships. Whilst at sea, as a character, you are at your most vulnerable. And to add to the difficulty, the true path is very tight. And exploring often gets you nowhere. Many diversions kind of lead you to dead ends, which, of course, once you know, you can not go that way again. But for the first few reads, it is exceptionally hard. Time is of the essence, as I mentioned. This could be another deliberate feature, but it does kind of take away the whole idea of the adventure. You're so paranoid about running out of time or adding to your ship's log that you feel maybe you shouldn't explore, but of course you've got to explore to get the gold. By the end, you not only need to have survived all the personal battles, but the vessel battles as well. You have to reach Naipur in less than 50 days, like I say, but also finish with 800 plus gold, so a tall order. You really need to seek out that true path and gather a vast amount of gold and the slaves before heading for Naipur. The world kind of feels well described, which is quite common for this author. He's quite good at describing. There's a whole regional power struggle and a rich kind of history alluded to throughout this adventure. It gives kind of satisfying suggestion that the world does exist prior to prior to your involvement and will persist after you've had your pirating ways. There are at least 3 occasions where you can sort of encounter sort of sketchy customers or characters that have a history with you, the protagonist, and they have some past debts maybe that you need to pay off, or some kind of grievance. So there's all this background work going on that crops up every so often. In fact, there's one bit where you're sailing south towards the end and you get caught up in the middle of a vessel battle, right in the middle of 2 lines of warships just going at it, and it's nothing to do with you, it's just something that's going on at the time. So that's quite nice as well. I love the open premise of the book, sailing around and encountering different people and places, similar to Starship Traveller in some respects. Seas of Blood had a lot of mini adventures going on, which was quite nice, different locations, very rich locations. I could play the book again and have a different experience. I could probably do that now and still find something that I hadn't found before. Were it balanced better, I think this would have been an even more rewarding read through. My last experience with this one left me with about 2 gold pieces shy by the time I got to the end. That's a very tough thing for me to accept. But yeah, it's good. It's really good. All in all, it's a strong adventure with lots of playability, together with Bob Harvey's artwork. It's one of Chapman's strongest titles, I would say. And for that reason, I'm going to give Seas of Blood a 7 out of 10. Yeah, 7 out of 10. I want to give a shout out to a couple of people who read these books together on Twitch and then they post them onto YouTube. They're called Gone Hollow Media. So it's a couple actually, a guy and a gal, and they basically take it turns to read references and make the decisions. They got really good production value on their site. good following, and they're slowly working through all these books. And at the time of this recording, I think they just finished Trial of Champions, I think it was. So, or they may even still be working through that, but it's worth checking them out if you like these books. Yeah, Gone Hollow Media. Right, I think that's pretty much all I wanted to say about this book. If you'd like to give it a thumbs up, maybe share it if you think someone else might like it. Maybe leave a comment. The next book we're going to do will be book 17, which is Appointment with Fear. So that's Steve Jackson's solo effort coming back. That's going to be a great book, so I'm looking forward to reviewing that one. I'll catch you in that review.